party. Am I invited?
Yes. Yes, you're definitely invited. I invite you to all my parties. You just haven't seemed to show up.
No, well, is it on the East Coast?
Yes.
Well, that's why. Why don't you have one here on the West Coast? Because I work all the time.
Okay, well, maybe I have one at your house.
Where's that?
Were you surprised by the allegations about P. Diddy? Did that surprise you about P. Diddy? He's been on your show many times.
No personal beef with Diddy, but it's got to go down. The bits are there. I'm a gold miner. I just found some.
Joe Rogan just lit up the internet again, this time calling out the quiet around Ellen DeGeneres. With the Diddy chaos flooding every headline, Rogan's asking what a lot of people have been whispering for weeks. How is nobody connecting the dots? Ellen's name keeps sliding into this conversation, but most are acting like they don't even see it. When the Diddy news dropped and those heavy federal charges hit, the public did what it always does, went full detective mode. Old clips, old interviews, all those funny moments started getting replayed, and suddenly they didn't seem so harmless anymore. That's exactly where Ellen's name pops up again, right in the middle of it all. Viewers began digging through footage of Ellen and Diddy on her show, laughing, leaning in close, trading party jokes like it was nothing. But now, those same clips are being rewatched through a whole new lens, and they're hitting way different this time. People aren't laughing anymore. They're connecting it to something much deeper. And then Joe Rogan jumped into the mix. He straight up questioned why nobody's pressing Ellen the same way they're pressing everyone else. He pointed out that Ellen didn't just have Diddy on her show once or twice. It was multiple times. The party talk wasn't just casual chatter. It was on camera. It was easygoing. And now, fans are reinterpreting it as part of something much bigger. Think about it. The silence around her is loud. Is this just weird timing, or is it one of those topics nobody wants to touch? Things get even more suspicious when you remember how Ellen's show ended. That whole toxic workplace scandal didn't just fade away. It changed everything about how people saw her. And after that, she and Portia packed up and moved to the UK. Ellen said it was because of the political climate, but plenty of people online saw it as something else entirely. For a lot of watchers, that timing felt like a signal, not a coincidence. Coincidence maybe, sure, but the internet doesn't do maybe. That's why old receipts keep getting pulled up, with people asking what was really happening behind the scenes. So before diving deeper into Rogan's angle, let's rewind to why Ellen's name even matters here. Back when BuzzFeed News dropped that bombshell about her show, her entire Be Kind image went up in smoke. Former staff started speaking out, describing an environment filled with intimidation, racism, toxic management, and a workplace where people were too scared to speak up. It was shocking, especially from someone who built her career on kindness. What stuck with people most was that sharp contrast. The brand was all smiles and generosity, but the behind-the-scenes stories screamed pressure and fear. The backlash hit hard, and it hit fast. Several executive producers were removed, and Ellen herself had to address it publicly. But even after that, the debate never really went away. Was it just the producer's fault, or was the whole culture broken from the top down? Ellen defended herself, saying she didn't know everything happening behind the scenes. That's when the public split. Some believed her, others didn't. Either way, her reputation took a massive hit. The show kept running for a little while longer, but when Ellen finally ended it, saying it just wasn't challenging anymore, a lot of people weren't buying that. To them, it wasn't about challenge, it was about trust. And once that trust was gone, it never really came back. Now here's where things get wild. Joe Rogan finally broke down exactly what he thinks about Ellen in this whole Diddy mess. On his podcast, while diving deep into the Diddy talk, Rogan called out something that's been bugging him. How so many celebs used to brag about going to Diddy's parties like it was some kind of exclusive badge of honor. He said it straight. Yeah, no, Saucy is crazy. Have you seen Psy? Before mentioning people like Ashton Kutcher and others who spoke about those wild parties on camera like it was just fun and games. But Rogan didn't stop there. He pointed out that one of the biggest platforms where those party combos kept happening was none other than Ellen's show. Rogan's main point hit hard. How did all these famous faces orbit around those parties for years, joke about them publicly, laugh about them on national TV, and then suddenly act like they knew nothing when the serious stuff came out? The thing is, those party convos weren't subtle, not even close. One clip in particular keeps coming up. That 2018 interview where Diddy tells Ellen he keeps inviting her to his parties and she never shows up. Then he says, the parties start early, but the real party starts later, at midnight on the top floors. And Ellen reacts like she already knows exactly what that means. That's the moment that won't die online. People keep replaying it like it's a clue. So why does this matter so much? Rogan thinks it's strange that Ellen's name barely shows up in the mainstream coverage, even though she was right there in the mix for years. Diddy wasn't some random guest. He was on her show multiple times, and that party talk became a running joke. But now, those jokes don't land the same. People are rewatching them with suspicion. And it doesn't stop there. Old clips are resurfacing too, like that 2002 Conan O'Brien moment where Diddy joked about needing locks on the doors at his parties. Back then it came off like dark humor, but when people play it now, it doesn't sound like a punchline anymore. It feels like foreshadowing. Whether that's fair or not, the internet has already made up its mind. Then came the question everyone keeps asking. What did Ellen know, if anything? And if she didn't know anything, why isn't she saying a word now? People dug up that 2016 tweet where she playfully called him cuddle, snuggle stuff, and it's being read totally differently today. And those moments when paparazzi or interviewers try to ask her about it, she doesn't respond. Some say she looks tense, others say anyone would be uncomfortable being confronted like that. Either way, her silence just keeps fanning the flames. Rogan didn't twist it into anything wild. His point was simple but sharp. If you were close enough to have Diddy on your show multiple times, joke about those parties in front of millions, and react like you already know what goes down, people are definitely going to expect you to say something once those jokes turn into serious accusations. That silence from Ellen and others who moved in those same circles. That's what Rogan finds suspicious. But hold up, there's another layer that makes all this even murkier. The whole workplace scandal that ended Ellen's show. Former staff have said they felt scared to speak up, describing a culture of silence and pressure. Now, a lot of online commenters are comparing that same vibe, fear, control, and quiet, to how Hollywood handles powerful figures in general. It doesn't mean Ellen did anything criminal, but it does show why people keep drawing those parallels. The pattern just feels too familiar to ignore. There are also those behind-the-scenes stories people keep repeating, like the so-called Ellen Gaze, where a former crew member talked about how tense the set felt, or claims that certain guests were quietly kept off the show over personal issues. Nobody knows if every single detail is true, but the pattern people talk about is the same every time: control, pressure, and silence. And once the public starts seeing that pattern, they don't just watch the old clips, they reinterpret them. Every laugh, every joke, every reaction starts looking like a clue, and the moment that stands out the most, the one that shows how polished someone's public image can be, right before that image starts to crack. Back in 2009, Ellen DeGeneres actually put Diddy on the spot on her own show, right after Chris Brown was publicly accused of hitting Rihanna. She grilled him about why Chris was even allowed to stay at his house, and Ellen spoke with conviction, saying she didn't want any girl thinking it's okay to go back to a guy who hit her. It was a bold moment. She looked like she was taking a serious stand against abuse on national TV. But years later, when allegations about her own show's toxic culture exploded, that same moral stance started to look complicated. Former staff members began describing an environment that felt hostile and emotionally draining. Some even said the behavior behind the scenes felt abusive. That's why people online started calling it hypocrisy. Not because they were saying Ellen committed crimes, but because the contrast was glaring. One moment she's the one defending women and calling out violence, and the next, reports say her own workplace felt chaotic and unsafe. The flip was too much for the public to ignore. Then came the next twist. Reports that Ellen and Portia had sold off their Montecito mansion and quietly moved to rural England. The move was officially tied to the political climate in the US, but fans online immediately stitched it into something darker. They noticed the timing. Right as Diddy's legal situation started dominating headlines, Ellen packed up and left the country. Suddenly, people started asking whether it was just a coincidence or part of the same messy Hollywood timeline. And that's where the rabbit hole got wild. Because when the internet doesn't have answers, it starts building its own. Rumors started spinning fast. Some even claimed there was an arrest warrant linked to Ellen in connection to her former DJ, Stephen Twitch Boss, who tragically passed away in late 2022. Wild stories floated around about some recording supposedly being played in court, but fact-checkers jumped on it immediately. They confirmed the claims were completely false. Still, what shocked people was how fast those rumors spread. Because honestly, people weren't stopping to ask, is this true? They were asking, does this fit the storyline? With Ellen's reputation already bruised, her name became clickbait gold. Anything that sounded even remotely dramatic or dark stuck instantly. The internet didn't need proof, just a connection that looked cinematic enough to trend. That's how fast a rumor can outpace reality when people already don't trust the subject. That distrust is real, and it's why these stories just won't die. Even in her Netflix special, For Your Approval, Ellen talked about how she felt pushed out of show business and joked about how the Be Kind headline turned into her whole identity. But what really caught people wasn't the joke. It was her tone. She spoke about ego, exposure, and how hate always seems louder than love. She said, "There are such extremes in this business. People either love you and idolize you, or they hate you, and those people somehow are louder." But instead of hearing that as reflection, a lot of viewers heard it as deflection. It didn't sound like full accountability. It sounded like someone still processing the fallout, not confronting it head on. The audience read between the lines, and once again, that public trust didn't bounce back. Then came another viral twist. Aaron Rodgers went on the Joe Rogan Experience and compared Ellen's old talk show set to Epstein Island, claiming the architecture looked similar. Rogan immediately shut it down, saying it just looked like a building in LA and was probably pure coincidence. Still, the fact that it even came up at all showed how far Ellen's reputation has fallen in online spaces. People are now placing her name on the same wild conspiracy maps used for the darkest figures in pop culture, not because any of it's proven, but because the internet loves a storyline that feels cinematic and sinister. It's not always about truth. It's about what fits the narrative. So what are people actually saying now? The comments, the posts, the podcast takes, they all share one thing in common. It's not just the insults or the jokes. It's the pattern. The internet doesn't forget, and once a name becomes part of a bigger story, every move gets replayed, reinterpreted, and rewritten. And right now, Ellen's every silence, every smirk, every clip, it's all being viewed under a spotlight that won't fade anytime soon. Now the reactions are getting intense. One person straight up claimed that Ellen knew what was going on and is now living comfortably in England while Diddy's caught up in a federal case. Others are saying Joe Rogan is the only one bold enough to say what everyone else is secretly thinking. They're asking the big question: why do some names get dragged through the mud non-stop, while others seem to walk away with a softer edit? And then, of course, you've got the body language experts online. People dissecting old clips of Ellen avoiding questions, calling her reactions guilty looking. Now, that's not evidence, it's just perception. But perception is what drives these comment wars. Scroll through the replies, and you'll see the same themes repeating over and over again. The toxic workplace headlines, that public apology people said didn't hit right, the move overseas that fans treated like a signal, and now, this roaring Diddy conversation, looping back into it all. Everything's being stitched together into one messy, never-ending narrative. And that's exactly what keeps this story alive. People feel like Ellen never really faced full consequences, so now they're searching for a bigger explanation. And it all circles back to that question from the start. Why does it seem like nobody wants to talk about Ellen in this discussion? For a lot of people, the answer is simple. They think she's handled differently. Not officially, not in any legal sense, but in that she's still Ellen DeGeneres kind of way. Meaning fame, influence, and decades of connection still shape how her story gets told. Even off TV, Ellen has power, money, and relationships that can frame the narrative in a softer light. At least, that's what the internet believes. But what's different now is this. People like Joe Rogan don't play by those quiet industry rules. They'll say the things everyone else tiptoes around, not as accusations, but as questions. And once someone with that kind of massive platform treats a topic like a valid question, the audience grabs it and runs wild. Suddenly, a thought turns into a theory, and a theory turns into trending chaos. And let's be real, the controversy isn't that Ellen is worse than Diddy. That kind of leap is reckless and baseless. The real controversy is about the double standard. Why do some celebrities get picked apart relentlessly, while others get treated like they're off limits, even when the old clips, the quotes, and the weird optics are all sitting right there? That's why this conversation refuses to fade. Diddy's case cracked something open, and once people started rewatching those interviews and revisiting old jokes, they stopped seeing them as harmless fun. Suddenly, they looked like clues. The audience isn't just watching old talk show moments anymore, they're analyzing patterns. So what's next for Ellen? Honestly, probably quiet life. Unless someone steps up with real, verifiable evidence tying her to something illegal. Not theories, not vibes, not body language clips. She's likely going to be remembered more for the toxic workplace scandal and her frosty reputation than anything connected to Diddy. She'll keep her distance, keep things low-key, and let the noise fade. At least, that's the plan most expect. As for Diddy, his legal saga is nowhere near done. There are appeals, filings, civil suits, layers of battles that will keep unfolding in public. And every time his name trends, it drags more people back into the spotlight. Sometimes fairly, sometimes not. The internet doesn't let stories rest. It loops them, twists them, and ties new faces to old scandals. So what do you think? Did Ellen actually know more than she ever let on? Or is this just another case of the internet doing what it does best, turning speculation into a spectacle? Now that the dust is starting to settle, or at least it looks that way on the surface, the conversation is shifting again. People aren't just asking what Ellen knew anymore. They're asking what happens next. Will this wave of suspicion ever stop? Or is Ellen permanently stamped as one of those names the internet never lets go of? See, once a celebrity gets caught in this kind of crossfire, perception, rumors, timing, silence, it's nearly impossible to clean the slate. Even if no real evidence surfaces, the memory of the drama stays alive. Every new headline about Diddy, every flashback clip, every what-if post, Ellen's name quietly slips back into the mix. And that's what makes this situation so sticky. It's not about guilt, it's about narrative control. Rogan's episode cracked something open that's now way bigger than just one podcast moment. His followers started connecting dots that maybe weren't even supposed to be connected. And once that floodgate opened, the internet built an entire storyline out of assumptions. It's not just about Diddy anymore. It's become a commentary on Hollywood's whole ecosystem. Who gets protected, who gets exposed, and who gets erased. Some people online are calling this the Hollywood reset. They're convinced that the public no longer trusts mainstream media to call out the big names. So instead, they turn to podcasters, YouTubers, and digital creators who don't have to play nice with the industry. And that's why Rogan's words hit so hard. Not because he accused anyone directly, but because he said out loud what millions were already typing in comment sections. Meanwhile, Ellen's team has reportedly gone completely silent. No interviews, no statements, no clapbacks. That quiet might be strategic, but it's also fueling the speculation. When someone that famous disappears from the public eye, every move gets overanalyzed. Even a casual outing turns into proof for people searching for a storyline. Still, not everyone's buying into the conspiracy wave. There's a smaller but vocal group saying this whole thing has spiraled out of control. They're warning that internet justice isn't real justice. That piling rumors on someone with no confirmed facts does nothing but keep the outrage cycle alive. One person even commented, "We keep saying we want truth, but what we really want is a new villain every month." And honestly, that line hit home for a lot of viewers. But here's the catch. When a name like Ellen's carries years of mixed headlines, the public doesn't always separate truth from tone. The workplace scandal bruised her image, and now everything she ever said or did gets replayed through that filter. So even when there's no solid link between her and Diddy's world, the internet still folds her into that narrative because it feels like she fits the pattern. That feeling, that vibe, becomes the evidence. And that's the wild part. In today's culture, vibes often outweigh facts. A raised eyebrow, a strange silence, an awkward smile. It all becomes part of the case the audience builds in real time. No courts, no judges, just social media detectives and endless threads that decide who's guilty by association. But if you step back for a second, it says something bigger about how fame works now. Ellen went from being one of the most loved figures on daytime TV, dancing, joking, and handing out gifts, to a symbol of how fast that love can flip. It's like the public still processing how someone so polished could fall from grace that fast. And every new rumor gives them a reason to revisit that fall. At this point, the internet's obsession isn't really about answers. It's about keeping the story alive. Because as long as Ellen stays quiet, people will fill in the blanks for her. That's what happens when a narrative gets away from the person at the center of it. Silence becomes its own kind of statement. So where does this all go from here? Probably more speculation, more TikToks, more YouTube breakdowns, and maybe even more Rogan takes. But unless someone steps up with verified receipts tying Ellen to something bigger, this whole saga might just keep looping, endlessly recharging itself every time Diddy's name trends again. Still, one thing's for sure. The line between entertainment and investigation has never been blurrier. What used to be casual celebrity gossip is now treated like a crime doc waiting to happen. And in this new world of digital storytelling, truth moves slower than speculation. So maybe that's the real headline here. Not Ellen, not Diddy, not Rogan, but how the audience itself has changed. How people now demand explanations, connect patterns, and won't rest until every mystery fits the bigger story. Whether that story's real or not doesn't even matter anymore. What matters is how believable it sounds online. And that's where Ellen's name sits right now. Not proven guilty, not fully forgiven, just suspended in that gray zone where perception becomes permanent. As this story keeps spinning, the internet just won't let Ellen fade quietly. It's like every time her name starts to slip out of the news cycle, something pulls it right back in. Now, the debate's evolved again, and people are asking a sharper question. Is Ellen just caught in the storm of celebrity backlash, or is this the start of something bigger that Hollywood's been avoiding for years? Because think about it, this isn't just about one person anymore. It's about power, reputation, and how far influence can protect you when the public starts asking questions. For years, Ellen was untouchable. The smiling talk show host who could make A-listers dance, joke, and open up like they were at brunch with a friend. But that same image, the polished America's sweetheart mask, is now the reason her silence hits harder than any statement could. It's not just what she's saying, it's what she's not saying. Online, people are treating this like a case study, watching how the same machine that built her up is now quietly letting her drift. Some say this is karma for years of behind-the-scenes arrogance, while others argue it's proof that the internet can't forgive anyone anymore. Every time her name trends, the reactions split right down the middle, half saying, she deserves it, the other half saying, y'all just love a downfall. Meanwhile, Rogan's comments keep echoing, because he didn't accuse her of anything outright, but he did pull the curtain back on that weird Hollywood silence. That's what hooked people. When someone with Rogan's reach even mentions that certain names seem to get handled differently, the internet goes into full decode mode. Suddenly, every old photo, every awkward interview clip, and every missing response becomes evidence. And let's be real, some of the newer fan theories are getting straight up cinematic. Threads are popping up suggesting Ellen's UK move was part of a quiet exile, while others spin wild timelines tying her departure to secret deals and celebrity cover-ups. It's dramatic, it's chaotic, and it's got zero verified proof. But the storytelling is addictive. It's like people can't help turning gossip into a Netflix-level mystery. The irony? The more Ellen stays out of sight, the louder it all gets. That silence that was probably meant to calm things down has now become its own headline. It's wild how in today's culture, saying nothing can sometimes make more noise than speaking up. And here's what's really fascinating. Some people are now comparing this whole situation to what happened with other big-name figures who fell from public grace. They say it's the same pattern: the rise, the praise, the backlash, the quiet retreat, and then the constant online autopsy of their legacy. Once someone hits that point, there's no going back to how things used to be. Not even with an apology, not even with a rebrand. But there's another side to this conversation that isn't getting enough attention: the fatigue. A lot of people are straight up tired of seeing the same names dragged over and over again with no new facts. They're saying this cycle of outrage is just entertainment now. A digital sport where public opinion swings depending on which clip's trending that day. Some even argue that this obsession with finding patterns says more about us than it does about Ellen herself. Because in the end, none of this changes what's proven. The Diddy case is still unfolding in real time, while Ellen's biggest controversy remains her toxic workplace scandal. Everything else, the party theories, the UK move rumors, the silent speculation, it's all just noise feeding off of uncertainty. And that uncertainty is what keeps the internet alive. Still, the question lingers. If you're someone like Ellen, with massive influence, a fractured image, and a fan base that's half loyal, half skeptical, what do you even do next? Come back and explain? Or stay quiet and hope time dulls the edges? Both options come with risk. And that's what makes this moment feel so tense. Because right now, Ellen's not just fighting a reputation. She's fighting a narrative that's been rewritten by millions of strangers. Once the public decides how your story feels, changing that perception is almost impossible. And that's the cruel part of modern fame. You can lose control of your own story without ever saying a single word. So maybe that's the real ending for now. Not a scandal that explodes, but one that never fully dies. Ellen's name lives in that strange digital limbo. Too famous to be forgotten, too controversial to be redeemed, and too silent to stop the story from growing. And every time another headline drops about Diddy or another celebrity meltdown, her name quietly sneaks back into the thread, like a ghost that refuses to leave the room. And that's where things stand right now. Ellen staying quiet in the middle of a storm that just won't quit, while the internet keeps spinning theories faster than anyone can fact-check them. Whether you think she's being unfairly dragged or that there's more to the story than meets the eye, one thing's for sure. This conversation isn't dying down anytime soon. The lines between truth, rumor, and perception are completely blurred, and every time a new piece of this puzzle drops, people are ready to dig even deeper. Maybe Ellen's just living her life far from the spotlight, or maybe that silence means something more. Depending on who you ask, you'll get a totally different version of the truth. But that's the world we live in now, where a single clip, a reaction, or even a pause can rewrite how we see someone forever. And whether you're team Ellen knew or team internet's doing too much, it's clear that this story has already taken on a life of its own. So, what do you think? Is this just another Hollywood mystery getting overblown? Or is there really more behind those old clips and that sudden move overseas? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear where you stand on this. And don't forget, hit that like button, smash subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next deep dive. Because trust me, this story's far from over.